Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of my podcast. Today's podcast is going to be on reality. And as usual, I'm going to start it off with a quote. There are some people who live in a dream world, and there are some people who face reality. And then there are those who turn one into the other. And that's a quote by Douglas H. Everett. So today we're going to talk about reality. And I know in the past I've talked about perception. Your perception drives your reality. Your perception drives your reality. But in actuality, your perception is your reality because what you perceive, you believe. So if you think something is hard, that's going to be the reality of the situation. That's going to be your reality. It's going to be hard. Um, and I know I've mentioned the app Blinks before, and Blinkist, I'm sorry, is basically an app where you go on there and it has like books. And basically what it does is it surmises the book or summarizes the book. Um, Basically the important parts of the highlights of the book. And the book that I'm going to be referring today is titled Deviate, and it's by Bulotto. And what he talks about in this book are the details surrounding our perception and our reality. He goes into a lot of detail about our senses and context and stuff like that. And it was really impactful and insightful to me. So I thought I'd create a podcast surrounding that information. This is not all the information that was in that book or on that blank, but it's a good bit of it. But I would recommend highly that you download the app and that you look into this book. You can read it or you can get it to speak to you. So it would be great for if you were driving or commuting. So let's get into it. A lot of things that we think are real are actually lies as far as what we perceive. Um, our brains trick us as a product of evolution and various cognitive functions. So, our brains are geared for survival. So, in large part, the decisions that we make and the fears that we feel and the logic that we kind of gather surrounding situations are based in that mindset. What can we do that will preserve our existence for the longest? And that kind of thinking doesn't help us or serve us in the long run because that type of thinking is not geared towards accomplishing dreams or setting out goals or and overtaking them or accomplishing those goals. This type of thinking is more in line with just survival. Um, it's more in line with you living for a certain amount of time, procreating so that your bloodline and your genetics can, you know, go live longer than you do, or ensure that your genetics survive a certain period of time. Is not geared for success. It's not geared for you know going out and doing something that's against the status quo, or going out and doing something that sets you apart or makes you stand out. That's not what your mind is geared for, and that's why you have to train it. And because your perspective will largely be based on context, which is something he also talks about. It's one of my other notes. Is based on the context, and that's the things around you. So if you only have negativity around you, it's only going to be based on that negativity. You have to have something positive, and you have to have something different than the status quo, different than what other people say and talk about, different than what is perceived as normal, because normal is not going to get you your dreams and goals. You have to be above the rest, or you have to be set aside from the rest in order to get your goals, because what the 1% are doing and what people want to accomplish their goals are doing, people aren't doing by and large. And that's why there's such a big gap. It's not that the information that they know is so earth shattering. They've just been able to master basic principles, and in mastering those basic principles they've been able to change their lives. But again, it starts with perspective, which in essence is your reality. What we think of as reality is just an interpretation. Your perspective is an interpretation. So again, and I'm kind of stepping on my points later on down the road, our brains get this overload of information, just overload of information. And when we get this information, it's our job to interpret what we see. And again, I'll get into it a little bit later, but sometimes what we see isn't always the truth. So this interpretation that we're making based on the information that we get is sometimes wrong, which may cause us to perceive or create a reality that actually doesn't exist. So we have to be stewards of our thoughts and mindful of what interpretation we're making and what information is based on, because it might not be the full picture. And sometimes that's not our fault. Sometimes it is our fault. It's just the way our brain may be set up. But it's just something else that we need to be aware of in life, because knowledge is power. And the more we know about our bodies, our minds, and the battles that we fight on a daily basis, and what we're up against, the more better we will be prepared to face the obstacles and the hurdles that we have uh, in our efforts to try to be successful. There's an object reality, however, our brains do not see it. And an example of this is or are the various optical illusions. You can go on the internet and you could look up those optical illusions, and it'll be like, these one circle is smaller than the other, but they're actually the same size, or one square is darker than the other, but it's actually based on lighting. And again, that goes back to what I was just talking about our brain receives a ton of information, but it's not all, it's based on our interpretation of that information. So sometimes lighting can throw off our interpretation of that information. Movement can throw off our interpretation of that information. Um, and another good example is like if you've ever been on a train, and or at a train station, and two trains are sitting side by side, and you're sitting still, but one train pulls forward or starts to move forward. At first, you might get that feeling that your train is moving backwards, but your train may not be moving at all. Um, that's another illusion that's created by several different things, but again, it's your interpretation of the information that your mind is receiving at that point in time, based on the context and its surroundings. Again, it's not true, but based on the context of everything, that's what your brain perceives with the information that it has on deck. um, Optical illusions show us that our interpretation of reality is largely influenced by our surrounding context. Again, that's what we just talked about. Context is important. One of the things they talk about in the book is like when you're facing a hill, like when you're walking and facing a hill. So if you if you're walking down the road and you come up to this hill and you just have to walk the hill, it's no big deal, right? But if you've ran a mile and then you get up to this hill, now is a little bit different, because you've already run a mile, you're a little bit tired. So now you're going to perceive it as a whole lot harder than you perceived it when you were not as tired. So the context of what you're doing drives your reality. Now the hill is a whole lot harder to climb because you're tired, as opposed to, I'm just starting off. I just got to walk this hill. Oh, it's nothing, because the lactic acid isn't building up. Your muscles aren't fatigued. You're good to go. And this leads on to another point. I'm sorry, that our reality is determined by our inward stability, like what our mindset is, what our thoughts are, what we're focusing on. If you perceive something to be hard, it's gonna be hard. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you perceive anything to be a challenge, if you perceive anything to be difficult, if you perceive that you're unable to grasp a certain concept, if you perceive that, my family hasn't been able to do this for generations, so what makes me different, then that's going to be your reality. We all these little components that we discuss and that we talk about, they all add up to a bigger puzzle that is you. But what we have to do is we have to focus on each individual piece of this puzzle, because no piece is more important than the other. And an effort to learn as much information about these different pieces of the puzzle, we'll be able to build ourselves into the person that we need to be in order to get towards our goals. And a lot of people, I feel, and I've said this before, don't focus inwardly enough, and they focus on changing their outward circumstances. They perceive something as being something that they don't want it to be, so they try to change it or change the circumstances surrounding it. When in essence, you need to worry about changing yourself. You need to focus inwardly first, change yourself, and then everything around you may change. It may not, but then you can remove yourself from that situation. But you still need to, it still starts with you. Because like I always say, in every situation that you will face in your life, the one thing that's going to be constant in every single situation is you. You are the constant. If you take yourself out of that situation, it no longer is your problem or your situation because you're not involved with it. So anything that you face, anything, any difficulty, any hurdle, challenge, anything that you face, the one constant is you. So the one thing that you'll always be able to bring into the situation, the one thing you'll always be able to change to affect the situation is you. Your thoughts, your outlook on reality, your perspective on the problem, on the situation. It all starts and ends with you. We are flooded with a ton of information, but for that information to have any value, it has to be divided and processed. So an example of this, we get from the outside world, we receive photons, chemicals, and vibrations. And these photons become colors, chemicals become taste, and vibrations become sound. And because of this flood of information, our body has adapted to filter out the information, so we only receive what we need. Again, like I said earlier, we are receiving so much information, and our body notices that we're receiving so much information, and we can only process so much information, and this is what causes our reality to be skewed. Um, that little tidbit of information was talking about from a scientific standpoint. The photons that we receive from our surrounding become the colors and the things that we see as far as vision. Chemicals are like things that we taste and stuff like that. And certain frequencies that we hear, certain visible light that we can see on the spectrum. We can, as human beings, we can only hear certain frequencies or certain range of frequencies, and we can only see certain spectrums of light. And if you look at the frequency scale and you look at the spectrum of light, is much much bigger for both of them than what we can hear or what we can see. So when we look out into the world and we're receiving this information from the world that we're using to create our reality, in essence it's only a small bit of what the world has to offer. It's not the total picture, it's not the whole picture. We're only seeing, but like a very very small fractional part of the information that's out there to make what we call reality. And there are some things that we can't see, there's some things that we can't hear, there's some things that we can't taste, and that dampens the quality of our experience because we have to make conclusions based on the little information that we have. And this kind of goes, like, I guess, into like the spiritual world and things that we can't explain. And that's why I say when people bring stuff to me and they're talking about, you know, um, spiritual stuff or, stuff that we just can't explain, I don't discredit it. I might be like, yeah, that sounds kind of off, but I'll look into it. I don't discredit it. But at the same time, what can I say about it? It's kind of like it could be possible. I can't say it's not possible, but because there's so much information that we as human beings don't have access to. They always say like dogs can tell when a person is bad. And dogs can hear higher frequencies. Maybe it has something to do with vibrations. Maybe they can smell something on someone. Maybe it's a concept that we can't conceptualize because we don't have access to that information. And even with science, as far as we've gone with science, maybe that's just the tip of the iceberg because we don't have access to information that's readily available to other animals. And we're limited. So that's coming from a scientific standpoint, but it shows us in great deal that the information that we're basing our very existence on is very limited. And science does a good job to kind of fill in the holes, especially by allowing us to see that there are a wide range of sounds and a wide range of light on the spectrum that we can't even see. So we have that information knowing that it's not there. But again, it goes back to this is why we have to gain knowledge and empower ourselves, because somebody who didn't know that or hasn't learned it yet thinks that, their five senses are feeding them all the information that there is to be gained, and it's definitely not. And it's the same thing, speaking unscientifically, it's the same thing with anything else in life. You know, how do you walk through life and think that you know everything, or that you've reached your final stage, or you've gone to college so you know all there is to know on a certain job or in a certain field? It's there is tons of information out there, tons of information out there. And in 2020 we have had access to more information than any other time in the world, and it's readily available. It's at our fingertips. So but in gaining all that information and having access to all that information is very important, which is also something I think that society has lost the grip with, that we learn how to interpret that information and decipher what's true and what's not true. Because a lot of people have truths, but those truths are truths for them. They're not objective truths, like truths that are true for everyone. It's true for them. And a lot of people, I feel, especially in politics and sometimes in religion and, and a lot of other spheres out there, I just name those two because those are kind of the two biggest ones. But a lot of people see things in black and white. I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about like definitives. Like if it's not this, then it must be this. But what I've learned through life, and it's been a very painful lesson, but there are shades of gray, and the world is full of it. Like it's not there. It's not just if it's not this, is that. There's shades of gray. It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And there's a big lesson in that as well that we could apply to, I mean, politics, religion, I mean, everything. It's a very valuable and impactful lesson that I've learned. So back to the book. Our senses give us a distorted reality. We just discussed that at length. Just because we got five senses doesn't mean that they're operating at the same level as the animals around us. Like dogs can hear much higher frequencies than we can. Other animals can see uh, a wider range of light on the spectrum than we can. So our senses lie to us. So we need to be aware of that and just adapt and overcome. We learn and develop by interacting with the world. I've heard a lot of, especially a lot of like motivational speakers, especially Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan talks about going outside and being in nature and stuff like that. He talks about going hiking and maybe going up to a mountain, looking out over the peak and just being out in space and, not spaces in the universe, but being out in space, like open space, away from cities and cluster and loud, loud noise, and just being with yourself. There is something to that. I mean, if you're ever out in nature, or if you ever are just out on your own, there is definitely something that is to that clears your mind, that clears your soul and your spirit. And I don't know how to explain it, but there is definitely something to that. I remember there were times when I was in the desert in California, and we had finished training for the day, and we were just out chilling. at night before we started going to sleep. And I remember I just kind of walked off by myself, not far, but just a little bit away from everybody else. And I just looked up, and in the desert, there are no skyscrapers, there's no street lights, there's no artificial light. You only have the light that you bring. So the amount of stars that you can see is, I mean, awe-inspiring. Like there's like no space up in the sky. Like it's crazy. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I was really taken back by it. It was just beautiful, and I mean, it's just infinite. Like when you look at it, I mean, I don't see how you wouldn't be amazed. And that was one of the greater experiences that I feel I've had in my life, is just being able to sit back, chill, and just take that all in. And that was a very deep and inspirational moment. It really makes you feel like you're not as important. Because a lot of times we feel like we're the center of the universe, but in actually we're like a very very small piece of this universe. And when we pass away from this life, I mean, the world is gonna go on without us. So we just need to be real with ourselves, and again put it in perspective that we're not the center of the universe. Um, just like athletes train their bodies, we can train our minds. Information is power. The more information you know, the better you'll be able to train your mind, and the better you'll be able to face the obstacles that are are gonna come up in your life, because you're gonna face obstacles. And I wouldn't want an easy life, because if everything came to me easy, then when the hard times come, how would I be ready to fight those hard times? How if you don't have experience in dealing with the difficult, how are you gonna learn to handle the difficult, so when it comes up, you'll be ready for it? You don't want to be successful having not faced any trials, and then when you get successful, you face your first set of trials, and now you lose everything because you didn't know how to face a simple obstacle or a simple hurdle. um Training the mind equals continuous exposure to new stimuli. Try something new. Try something new. That's how you change your perspective. Don't get stuck in the rut of, this is how I've always done it, or this is how it's always been done. Try something new. Get out there, read a new book, or look at something from a new perspective. Take a new class, experience something new, try something new, read something that you wouldn't normally read. I got books on like astrophysics and quantum science and stuff like that. I just read it, like not consistently, but I definitely just read it when I need to change from all the stuff that I'm reading. I usually just jump into the quantum physics books, and it is crazy. Like some of that stuff that is in those books, like are in those books, like quantum entanglement and stuff like that. It's just crazy, and it just opens your mind up to like a new way of thinking, a new you see new possibilities, and you're thinking on levels that you wouldn't have previously thought of, because you didn't have the information to take your mind to that point. So you definitely need to expose yourself to new stimuli constantly. Constantly. Past context can have an effect on present interpretation. When you're reading, this is an example. When you're reading, and our mind fixes typos automatically because it knows what the word is meant. So you already know the English word or the English derivative. So I'm sorry, the English vocabulary. So when you're reading and like a word is messed up, like it might be for or whatever. But some by and large, like when we read, we might not even notice it. And we just may keep on reading. And then maybe if we look back over it or we go back to it, we'll see that, the word is messed up. But when we go through it the first time, we don't really pay attention to it because our mind is just so adaptive to things being a certain way and seeing something the way it's supposed to be instead of the way that it is. And that's an important lesson right there. We don't need to see things the way that they are, the way that we want them to be. I'm sorry. We need to see things the way that they are so that we can deal with things the way that they are and transform them into the way that we want them to be. We could change how we perceive the world. All of these little tidbits that I hit are all ways that we could change how we perceive the world, how we could change our reality and make our reality work for us. So then I went on to Google, um, I'm done with the book now. That's just a little tidbit of the information in the book. I would again recommend that you download Blinkist and you listen to the whole book or listen to the blinks. But I also went on to Google and was doing some more research. And on bustle.com, that's bustle.com, they have an article on 11 different ways to change your perspective. And the list starts off with stop thinking in terms of should. Again, don't think about things as what you want them to be. Think about things as they are. Like, oh, I should be happy, or she should treat me this way, or he should have done it. It doesn't matter what they should have done. What they did is what has been done. So treat things as they are, not as they should be. Number two, consider the other's perspective. You're not the center of the universe, and there are shades of gray. Somebody else's perspective could be right. It could be a combination of both y'all's perspectives. So think about other perspectives. Number three, look for something positive. Stop focusing on the negative. There's something positive in every situation. Principle of polarity. That pendulum swings. So as much negative as there is or that you might experience, that pendulum is going to swing back opposite and equal to that, and it's going to be positive. Number four, think of the bigger picture. It's not about you. What's your why? Why are you doing this? Why are you here? Why do you not want to live the status quo? Why do you want to be different? Think about the bigger picture. Number five, show gratitude. Be thankful. If you can't find nothing to be thankful for, be thankful that you woke up today, because a lot of people didn't. You could just start with that. Smile. Why not? Why not? That's simple. Why not smile? Getting in the workout. I love this one. I work out every morning, or at least try to, and I feel that much better for it. Getting in the workout gets your mind right. It deals with a lot of things that you might have going on inside, like anxiety or depression, or fatigue. Like, getting a workout in get your body going, get your mind right, get you ready. Help others. Helping others is something that you can definitely do that will bring satisfaction to you. You like I've helped at food kitchens, I've handed out blankets, stuff like that. And I'm not bragging about it. I was just giving some examples, but those are things that have been really fulfilling to me. Number nine, take a nap. Sometimes you gotta rest and get away from it. Sometimes you gotta take a break. Sometimes you gotta do a hard factory reset, and you just gotta take a nap and get away from life for a little bit. Just lay down, take a nap, get back up, try it all over again. Number 10, write down your negative thoughts. This is something that I've read about from other other motivational speakers. They say write down your negative thoughts and then crumple them up and throw them away. That's something they say practice that will help you put things in perspective or deal with those thoughts that you have flooding in that monkey mind. And the last one is say positive thoughts to yourself. Create a mantra. Mine is healthy, wealthy, successful, and wise. When my monkey mind starts going crazy, that's the mantra that I say to myself: healthy, wealthy, successful, and wise. And you can create your own mantra, whatever serves you. Just create something that's a constant reminder to who you want to be, where you want to be, what you want to do, and how you're going to get there. Just something simple: healthy, wealthy, successful, and wise. Like, that's something that I could just say over and over again, and automatically it's a reminder to focus on where I want to go and who I want to be.